Hi everyone, welcome to IMC Licensing's webinar on food and beverage licensing. I'm Robert Hevern, a licensing associate at IMC, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar, which is hosted by IMC's co-founder and president, Kara Bernoski. Kara is responsible for managing the day-to-day operations here at IMC. Since co-founding IMC Licensing in 1997, Kara has developed wide-ranging portfolios of licensed products for several clients, and works intimately with clients and internal staff on strategic licensing plans. Kara also has been selected to speak about food and beverage licensing at leading industry events including Licensing University and Link. Kara's presentation will last approximately 30 minutes, and there will be a 15-minute question and answer session at the end. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please send them to imcnews@imclicensing.com. and Kara will answer as many questions as time permits. Again, thanks for joining us today, and I will now turn it over to Kara for the rest of the program.
Thank you, Robert. I'm going to start with just a real brief introduction on IMC. I know Robert just touched on it in my introduction, but first couple slides here just to tell you a little bit more about IMC, that we're focused on developing and managing licensing programs for iconic food, beverage, and consumer product brands, and these are some of the clients with whom we work. Today's agenda, we're going to talk about establishing the right program to meet your food and beverage brand strategy. And we're going to start with why license. I'll take you through a food and beverage industry overview. We'll explore the options. We'll talk about identifying partners, mitigating risk, and then last but not least, implementing a program. Food and beverage licensing is everywhere. Consumers can find licensed food products in supermarkets, where you would expect to find them, where food and beverage brands give new food and beverage products instant credibility. I mean, think how often we encounter products such as Nesquik chocolate milk, or Oreo ice cream, or even Sunkist soda, none of which are made by the companies that own those brands. But pay attention, and you will see food and beverage licensing a little farther afield too, in distribution channels as diverse as casinos, fashion retailers, toy stores, cosmetic aisles of drugstores, or home stores. Got a couple examples here. For example, a Tabasco slot machine, Jell-O lip balms, trendy Oscar Mayer apparel and accessories that were done by the ultra-cool designer Paul Frank, or a Kool-Aid stand. All of these take food and beverage licensing not to just new aisles of a grocery store, but to entirely new retail locations. It's no surprise then, as we look at this overview of the licensing industry, that trademark and brand licensing is the largest segment of the $71 billion licensing industry. And 38% of trademark brand licensing is in the food and beverage category. So why license? First, let's talk about where licensing fits in the mix. The illustration here on the right shows licensing as really just another spoke on the wheel in the marketing mix. We all know that marketing and brand managers spend a lot of time thinking about advertising strategy, public relations strategy. Well, licensing is really just another extension. And we're seeing marketing and brand managers really spending more time on thinking about what licensing role can be in that process. So let's break this down into three major things that licensing can do for your brand. Reinforce your brand, build your brand, and improve the bottom line. Reinforcing your brand. Some licensed products are very much like the brand's core product itself. They may be used the same way, like a food product for a food brand. They may be used by the same consumers, like sports apparel for a sports brand. Or they may be distributed in the same channels, like a hot dog bun for a hot dog brand. These products can achieve every brand manager's goals of supporting brand awareness through new products, usage occasions, and impressions. They They increase a brand's presence at retail and share of mind of shopping consumers and really help sustain market share against competitors. Moving on to build your brand. Some licensed products not only reinforce your brand, but actually build it, because licensing can take a brand beyond its core category or channels of distribution, reminding consumers not only of what the brand is, but allows it to mean more. This increases the brand's functional and emotional equities and allows consumers to make it an even more meaningful part of their life. And now this last point, improving the bottom line. While we never think that this is the most important consideration and is one not to be ignored, licensing not only reinforces and builds your brand, but it also generates independent financial returns on the brand itself. While, again, no brand should enter licensing solely for that income, royalty revenue, which is generally a percentage of licensee wholesale sales, can make an important contribution. In some cases, brands evaluate whether licensing out part of their operation would yield a higher return on investment. There are other financial benefits to licensing as well. For example, cross-promotions with licensees can directly expand sales of a brand owner's core products. And many licensees become important customers of the brand itself for ingredients. Additionally, the value of impressions generated from licensed products is increasingly part of the calculation of the value of licensing to an organization. And we've been spending some time looking at trying to get a universal way for the licensing industry to calculate those non-financial benefits of licensing. This next slide, I know it has a lot on it, but maybe better for you to kind of digest separately, but I wanted to just put a grid up here that talked about other activity going on in the sector to illustrate some of the brands that are licensing and the kind of retail sales they're generating from it. Sunkist is a real star in the licensing industry in the food and beverage sector. While their core product is really tied to fresh citrus products, they have expanded their brand into a variety of different products, ranging from the soda to snacks to baking mixes to salad toppings. And they are doing this globally and generating retail sales in excess of $1 billion. So it's a really impressive portfolio that if you're considering food and beverage licensing, it's worth taking a look at what they've done because they've done it so well. But this slide also talks about other brands like Reese's, Hershey, Heath that are licensing into categories like refrigerated dough, ice cream, chocolate milk. Master Foods are they're doing similar categories. Kraft's portfolio of brands is licensing into a variety of different product categories as well. So, if you've decided that licensing is a good fit for your brand strategy, then what we want to move into now is exploring the variety of licensing options that are available to food and beverage brands. And I've broken this down into, again, three major categories: food to food, food to non-food, and non-food to food. We'll start with food to food. This option tends to be the most lucrative and profitable because of the volume potential of consumable food products. It also supports the licensor's own business directly when it can extend the flavor of an existing food product into closely related food categories. One caveat, though, for a brand owner is that you really do have to be cautious that it doesn't cannibalize your existing business. And you need to also evaluate whether this is something that you would be best served doing via a license agreement or doing internally. I have some examples here of food-to-food brand licensing successes, including Lifesaver Frozen Novelties, Sun-Maid Raisin Bread, Southern Comfort Eggnog, and Godiva Ice Cream. So whether by creating additional consumption occasions, expanding into new distribution avenues, or lending a distinct flavor, licensing in this space really can be needle moving for the brands. Food to non-food. These licensed products tend to help create what I call badge status for the brand. For example, a brand gains a real boost in relevance if people associate with it so much that they're literally willing to wear it on their chest, or better yet, if a celebrity is spotted wearing a t-shirt with their brand on it. I've got an image up here of Kevin Federline wearing a Kraft macaroni and cheese t-shirt that appeared in In Touch magazine. So when you get the kinds of impressions that are generated by some of those magazines, again, it's really helping create that badge status for your brand. Sometimes products in this realm can help consumers recreate a brand experience or are actually used with the core product itself. One of the examples on this slide are Jell-O branded Jell-O molds. Obviously a very logical connection of a non-food product with a food brand. Also shown here are a Tabasco special edition crock-pot slow cooker where you can whip up your favorite spicy recipe. And the other example shown here on this page is a Jack Daniel's themed game room. Again, sort of immersing yourself in a brand because you're so passionately connected to it. Non-food to food. This is another option brand managers can explore, but it's almost the reverse of what we've been talking about here. This is when perhaps licensing in a non-food brand will help your food products sell more. You see a lot of this done in the snack food and cereal aisle with the plethora of character-based products such as Care Bears or Shrek fruit snacks. Another example shown here would be something like Louisville Slugger sunflower seeds, where you link a baseball equity with a product so often associated with the game of baseball. Or one of my favorites, the Scooby Snack dog treats. The latest wave in this area has been some of the biggest character properties licensing into healthy snacks, such as the SpongeBob SquarePants baby carrots, or the Dora Explorer oranges, or Elmo cherry applesauce, and probably most recently of note is the Disney partnership with Kroger for over 100 branded healthful food items. So, time will tell the success of those particular initiatives, but they're certainly worth noting here as a strategy that a food and beverage brand can explore. Moving on to partner identification. So once you've set your strategy, the next step is identifying the right partners. And due to retailer and manufacturer consolidation, sometimes there are only one or two possible partners or suitable partners in a category. So then you need to determine if the top player even needs a brand to license, or if they're so well established that they don't need to license in a brand. Sometimes the number 2 or number 3 player could actually benefit more from licensing a brand in to help them compete against the market leaders and potentially steal market share from them. You also need to identify a partner that meets your values and commitment to social responsibility. If you're an alcohol beverage brand, you need a partner that's committed to keeping licensed products out of consumers who are under the legal drinking age. If you're a company that's committed to doing its part to ward off childhood obesity, the licensed products must follow suit. There are many companies that have policies in place now that mandate everything from the nutritional values of foods to what kind of healthy serving size needs to be depicted whenever the product is shown, whether it be in advertising or on the packaging itself. to limiting where the products can be advertised to make sure that they aren't being targeted to children that are too young. So those are a variety of factors that need to be evaluated, because if the core brand and company are holding themselves to those standards, the licensed products really need to follow suit. And the other thing that I want to mention here is to resist the temptation to go with a potential partner who happens to be the one who picked up the phone to call you. We see this over and over again where brands end up in a licensing arrangement sort of reactively. They hadn't set out to do it, but somebody had called them with a proposal and it didn't sound bad, so they went forward with that potential partner without having vetted all of the other potential partners in that space. And while it may be that that one that called you on the phone really is the best possible partner, you really need to do your due diligence in making sure that they are the best possible partner for that space. And moving into the due diligence piece of the process here, this is really important to mitigate the risk, to make sure your partner is capable of delivering what you're looking for in a licensee. We go through a licensee application process during which we really seek to understand what their proposal is, who is this company, who else have they worked with. We'll be sure to have conversations with other licensors with whom they've worked. We talk to retailers to understand how they view the particular licensee as a vendor. We ask them if they have other vendors in the category with whom they would prefer to work. It's really a sort of thorough vetting of the potential proposal and partner to make sure that you understand what they're bringing to the table. And a step beyond the actual application process is that it's important to run financial checks with a company such as like a Dun & Bradstreet to gain additional insight as much as possible into that potential partner. And any questions about the financial stability of that company may require, once you get to an agreement, guaranteeing a larger amount up front or structuring the agreement more creatively to ensure that the licensee is able to honor their commitments. If you're licensing into the food and beverage sector, you'll want to take a close look at the potential partner's manufacturing quality and quality and assurance procedures to understand what they are bringing to the table and if it will meet your criteria. Are they willing to submit to an outside food safety audit, or do they conduct some other type of audit that may be acceptable? Both parties in this process need to be willing to engage in a dialogue about what the mutual goals are and what the requirements are, and be able to just have a conversation to bridge any variances between those audit practices so both parties can be comfortable. Many times we see one company engages in a process that's conducted by one firm. Maybe the methodology varies, but the criteria is largely the same. And sometimes you just need to really get the parties together to talk about that and bridge any concerns. Wanted to just mention something that's a definite trend in the food and beverage quality area, and it's called the National Food Processors Association Supplier Audits for Food Excellence. It's a mouthful, so it usually goes by the shorter version, NFPA Safe Audits, which is something that was implemented in August of 2001. And the basic goal is that it promotes uniformity of food industry audit standards and auditor practice. So these audits can take 3 to 5 days to complete. They can be expensive and they're burdensome to schedule and complete, but they are extremely comprehensive, and they really do provide the licensor the highest degree of assurance. Additionally, I wanted to bring up insurance limits. In non-food agreements in non-risky categories, an insurance requirement may only be about $2 million, but almost always when it comes to food or beverage license agreements, that amount really needs to be increased more to about a $10 million limit, just due to the higher potential for concern in those categories. Moving on to product development. What sort of resources is the potential licensee able to bring to the table in terms of product development? Are they willing to work collaboratively with your own specialists in flavor development to ensure they deliver the flavor equities you will require? You need to ask some of these questions and really sort of delve deep here. Are they going to be buying ingredients directly from you? Or are they going to be working with one of your approved flavor houses? It can be really tricky when you're translating a food and beverage brand into an adjacent category to ensure that they're delivering on the flavor promise of the core brand, yet that it works in the new product category. And one thing going into it is that you really need to allow enough time to go through this process, because it can be very time consuming, and as you go through different rounds between labs and then working maybe with consumer tasting panels, because you really do have to kind of bridge this gap between what the brand knows so intensely about their brand in its core product category and what the expectations are in the other category in which it's to be licensed. And so sometimes consumer testing panels can be real useful in actually settling debates on what the consumer will actually want to buy at the end of the day. Okay, so the deal is signed. Your work is done, right? Well, no. Managing the licensing program, we always joke, once the deal is signed, that's when the real work begins, because you've now spent a tremendous amount of time negotiating different provisions into the agreement. So now it's imperative that somebody really closely manage the product development to make sure that the licensed products meet those exacting standards of the brand's core product, and that includes quality control testing requirements, making sure that those come back at the levels that were and results that were required by the agreement. That means every single piece of collateral material and anything really related to the licensed product gets proper brand approvals. Another piece of this is that once the licensee is signed, that they are meeting their royalty obligations. And one thing that we've seen in the past is that sometimes somebody has spent a lot of time negotiating which deductions would be permissible in a license agreement, and sometimes those are never communicated to the proper parties within the accounting department who actually does the reporting. So if you're not careful and really closely evaluating those reports, making sure that you're not only receiving them, but that they are being done right, licensors can lose thousands and thousands of dollars through inaccurate or uncollected royalties. So assuming you get the licensee to comply with the basic requirements of the license agreement, what you want to work on now is working collaboratively with the licensee to integrate the licensing program into the brand's overall marketing plan. Typically, this requires collaboration between multiple points of contact between the brand's organization and the licensee's organization in order to be done well. I wanted to take you through a Southern Comfort eggnog case study that really kind of illustrates this message of integrating a program with a brand's core marketing goals. In this example, H.B. Hood is the licensee producing the Southern Comfort eggnog, which is now the best-selling eggnog. They worked hand in hand very well with the Southern Comfort brand. Together, they made joint sales calls and supported mutual coupons and sampling events where the core product, the Southern Comfort Spirit, and the licensed product could be sold together, and developed point-of-sale materials and did radio tags. And they had a different strategy in markets where the product could not be sold together. For those of you who don't know, Spirit sales are regulated differently by state, so it was really a process to navigate what was permissible in one market versus another. But they really worked together to support the program in those various markets in the most effective way. And the brand actually featured the eggnog, the licensed product, in its advertising campaign as part of, they do a holiday campaign called Comfort and Joy. So as a result, eggnog has really become an ownable strategy for the brand, and it's gone on to spawn on-premise holiday promotions at restaurant and bar accounts, and it's also led to other eggnog-inspired licensed products like cheesecake and coffee. So it's a really good example of how when you develop a licensing program that is right on strategy with the brand, how licensing and a brand's core marketing objectives can work together to create the best possible results for the brand. So, in conclusion, we're in an era of constricting budgets and advertising fatigue, and savvy brand managers are giving serious thought to how licensing can reach their consumers in new ways and generate tangible returns for their brand. So with a sound strategy in place and avoiding the temptation to do the deals that just happen to come your way, you can select the right partner, get the right product, and put those right controls in place from the start of the program. And at the end of the day, licensing can prove to be a very meaningful way for you to move the needle for your brand. Thank you, and I'm going to turn it back over to Robert, and we will begin to field some of your questions.
Thank you, Kara. Now Kara will begin answering some of the questions you have submitted throughout the presentation. If Kara does not get to your question today, she will follow up with you afterwards with a response. The first question: what questions should I be asking of our organization internally to decide if we are prepared to move forward with licensing?
Well, that's a good question, because it's always good to see when a potential client is thinking about what it means to them. I think most importantly, are they ready to commit the resources necessary to review the types of recommendations that would come out of a strategic planning process? Can internally we agree on a system to vet opportunities against any of our concerns, whatever those may be? Is this a business that we should or might want to get into ourselves, or could this be potentially cannibalistic to our core business? It's those sorts of things that there have to be internal resources that can make those considerations, so a licensing initiative can move forward. Sometimes, usually it's very helpful if there are at least a few opportunities that a brand is certain that they're comfortable moving forward with when the process is started. And then the other thing is, I guess as you are evaluating, is this something that we should be doing internally or using a licensing agent? You really need to evaluate those internal resources. Do you have what it takes internally to dedicate the time to identify, solicit, negotiate, and manage the programs, or would you be better served using an external party like a licensing agent, or do you want to build those resources internally?
Okay, thanks, Kara. The next question is kind of a two-part question. The first part, do food license agreements typically require an ingredient purchase? And if so, does that affect the royalty rate and guarantees?
Well, many times to the first part about whether they require an ingredient purchase, many times yes, but sometimes a flavor house can replicate, either the flavor house that the brand itself uses or another flavor house can replicate. Sometimes licensees themselves have the ability to replicate a particular flavor. It's just real important during that process to make sure that you're getting something out of it that truly reflects the brand. But one thing, if the packaging is going to say that it's made with real XYZ, it really needs to be made with the real XYZ and can't be a substitute. And then to the second part of your question about whether that would affect the royalty rate and the guarantees, we see that brand owners tend to look at that holistically. Many times these companies have an ingredient sale division within their organization that's going to be making some profit on that ingredient sale. So if that's the case, we would look at that with the brand owner and consider the overall contribution and value that that's creating for the brand, and there may be a reduction on the royalty rate. That said, we've seen sometimes where there is no concession because those are really viewed as two separate divisions, but most often we see it looked at holistically.
Okay. Question number 3. What if we had several deals that the organization has accumulated over the years? How can we manage them with a more strategic approach?
Okay, I think what this question is probably referring to is what we've seen with a lot of brand owners who end up having a smattering of deals that have accumulated from sort of various reactive proposals and programs that they've done over the years. So what we recommend is taking a pause, going through the strategic licensing planning process, and then once that has been set, really do an audit of your existing programs against that new strategy and be really deliberate about trimming the ones that aren't a fit and only adding new ones that really purposefully go to accomplishing your new objectives.
Okay. Question number 5. How do I evaluate the competitive landscape of different categories for licensed products?
Well, there are a lot of great resources out there that can provide insight into different categories. We use different things like Nielsen data. We turn to different industry annual reports. A lot of trade magazines have great information about what's going on in different sectors. We've developed a database of various information on different product categories just through our work. Over the years, we've been able to compile a lot of that information. We also send people to trade shows to make sure that we're canvassing on an annual basis and learning and seeing for our own eyes what those trends are in those sectors to make sure we're staying as current as possible.
Okay. The next question. Are there opportunities for smaller brands in licensing? It seems that most of the brands used as examples are pretty well established. What does the brand need to bring to the table that what does the brand need to bring to the table to be an effective partner for the licensee?
It's actually pretty simple. The brand that wants to be licensed needs to have established itself at least to the degree in its core category that there's at least a critical mass following that knows what the brand is and what equities, be them flavor or otherwise, that resonate with that constituency that can be transferred into a new product category. If it's such a small audience that only people in a very tiny geographic region, well, it's not going to support a national program. So it really needs to have enough of a critical mass to be able to work broadly. One of the things that's real critical for us to be able to look at is a brand needs to be willing and able to share information on what its awareness levels are, what kind of sales do they have, what's their breadth of distribution, what sort of advertising support is going behind that brand, where do they rank amongst their competitive set. All of that really needs to be evaluated in order to determine the licensability of a brand.
Okay, the next question is a long one. Can you give us some examples of licensed products that didn't quite work to expand the core brand's equity? Or were there Okay, the next question. Can you give us some examples of licensed products that didn't quite work to expand the core brand's equity? Or where there was one or more components missing from the formula you showed in your conclusion that negatively affected the outcome of a deal?
Well, we've probably all heard about licensing programs that have been signed with a licensee who has, subsequently goes belly up or files for bankruptcy midstream in a program. While that can happen to major corporations too, certainly some of these could have been avoided with proper financial due diligence on the front end. One example that comes to mind for me is that a number of years ago there was a Taco Bell program where Taco Bell licensed its name to tortilla chips for sale at grocery. Well, Taco Bell ended up getting dragged through the mud when the licensee used genetically modified corn in its chips. And, unfortunately for Taco Bell, even though they didn't make the chips, it was their name that was in the headlines and not the licensee when the scandal was all over the newspapers. So, I can't speak specifically to that example, but one could imagine that if very tight quality evaluations were being made along the way, that perhaps that's something that could have been avoided.
Okay. Next question. What can we learn from some of the recent moves by big licensors like Anheuser-Busch and John Deere to rein in their licensing programs? Are they getting out because of the risk, or are they trying to become more effective and strategic?
Well, we see them being more strategic. I've heard one major brand owner talk about it in this way. It's been a change from in the past when licensing opportunities would arise or they would be pursued, that would be a why not sort of perspective. And now they're really moving more towards why. Why are we doing this? What is it going to do for our brand? Is it making meaningful impressions with our consumers? Is it bringing us to either new aisles in our existing channels of distribution or to entirely new retail outlets altogether? What's it contributing financially to the program? So a combination of those financial and non-financial benefits of licensing are really being evaluated before deciding to just go into a licensing program, and that's really resulting in this trend of fewer, bigger, better licensing program deals that can really move the needle for a brand.
Okay, great. Finally, the last question. How long are typical license agreements?
Of course, nothing's ever typical, but I guess I could think about this in at least two major segments. If you're looking at a food licensing deal, you're probably looking at a term of about 3 to 5 years. A licensee is going to have to invest a significant amount in research and development. So on the food side, they need to be up and running long enough in order to be able to recoup their investment. On the non-food side, you're probably looking at more 2 to 3 years as more common lengths of terms. And sort of going along with that, we're seeing that renewals, while in the past some of them you would see automatic renewals more frequently, we're seeing written into agreements often required performance hurdles in order for a renewal to be considered. So
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kara, for answering those questions, and thank you for everyone for spending a small part of your afternoon with us. If you'd like to hear more information about IMC licensing or any of the topics that we discussed here today, please follow up with Kara and she will do her best to answer your questions. Thanks and have a great day.